Some of your colleagues, including Congressman Green on the floor this morning, calling for impeachment proceedings to begin in the House. What's the Democratic leadership view on that? And Mr. Cummings, if I could follow up with you after that, please. Republicans are saying that if James Comey had this memo, why did he keep it a secret? And that itself bears looking into. And I wonder if you could respond to that, please.
I'm not afraid of the I word. It's independent. Independent commission, independent investigator. That's what I support. That's also the general consensus of our Democratic leadership. And members can come to their own conclusions, and we don't pretend to stand here and speak on behalf of every single individual member of our caucus. But what I would suggest is that there needs to be a full investigation first. We need to get to the facts and let the facts lead where they may. Whatever that end result will be, first establish the facts.
Yeah, let me say this. With regard to impeachment, I agree with the chairman. We have to have the mechanisms to gather the facts. And they have to be credible, and they have to be robust, they have to be transparent. And so what we're talking about is gathering the facts. But there's something missing here that is very unusual, and I'm sure the lawyers up here will tell you. Normally when there is an investigation, you don't have the subject of the investigation talking negatively about the investigator or doing anything that might even give a possible appearance of trying to sway anybody. What usually happens, and I've represented a lot of clients, is we say, we're going to work with the authorities. We're going to cooperate. We may say something like, the person's not guilty or something of that nature. But here, what we've had is this constant drumbeat of negative comments and tweets coming out of the White House. What I've said over and over again is I would appreciate it, and I think the FBI and others would appreciate it, if the president would let our justice system do what it is constructed to do. And because I think the other things, basically, they do not help. And so with regard to Comey and the contemporaneous notes, that is not unusual. A lot of times people will create a paper trail for themselves because they don't know what's coming down the pipe. I've actually advised clients to make paper trails so that they would have their own individual notes. And so now it appears that things are coming to issue. He can then go back to these notes, and we still need to make sure that they are contemporaneous, by the way. But if he made notes, like immediately after his meeting, and maybe told others, and they saw him or whatever, that is very, very significant. And so the timing of, if all of this had never come up, these notes may have been totally irrelevant. But again, I guess, and I can't speak for Comey, but clearly, I think he's just trying to say, this is what happened. The president said something else different happened, and he's just trying to present the best evidence he has in his possession.
Just wanted to add on to my colleague. I think we'll have Director Comey come back to the Congress in fairly short order to testify before one committee or another, and I think he should with all dispatch. And obviously, the best evidence of what took place within the White House would be tapes if they exist, as the president alluded or threatened. And the next best evidence would be what the director has to say and what his notes have to say. In terms of whether the director should have reported to someone at Justice if he was concerned about the nature of those conversations, I think that's a perfectly appropriate question to ask the director when he comes and testifies, and I'm sure we'll want to ask him that. But we need to get to the bottom of it. And on the kind of broader question that people have asked about where does this all lead, I think that we ought to keep our focus on finding out the facts in the first instance. And no one ought to, in my view, rush to embrace, the most extraordinary remedy that involves the removal of the president from office. I participated in prosecuting an impeachment case in the Senate of a federal judge. It's a very serious undertaking, obviously, when it involves a lifetime appointment on the court. It's a whole other order of magnitude when we're talking about the President of the United States. And there are, the legal questions about whether the president's intent in asking Comey to drop the case, if that's what took place, was a corrupt or illicit intent in terms of proving a case of obstruction. But then there's the very practical question for all the members of Congress and the discharge of their duties about whether this rises to the level of requiring removal from office. And I think it's a very practical matter. In order for that remedy to be appropriate, the country has to believe that the seriousness of the conduct is such that this president cannot continue in office. It cannot be perceived as an effort to nullify the election by other means. That, at the end of the day, I think is the practical test of that. But because it's such an extraordinary and wrenching remedy, it's not something I believe that people should wish for, whether you like or dislike the president. I think we ought to undertake our constitutional obligations to find the evidence, follow the evidence, and if there's another constitutional obligation that follows from that, then there is. But I think we're a long way from knowing the facts here. At this point, among the most serious allegations are just that today. They're allegations that appeared in a newspaper report, but there are also allegations that will be easily subject to proof, and we ought to begin immediately by getting those memoranda, if they exist, as well as bringing the director and see what follows from there.
Chad, I'll come back.
Why should we believe that this discharge